In this video, we're going to be replacing the intake manifold runner control motor. We're going to take out these panel clips here. They're just a Phillips head. If you use the weight of the Phillips itself and spin these out, they should back out. If you push down while you're taking these out, they won't come out. Now with a panel tool, we can pop these clips out. All right, so now what you can do is grab your air intake tube from right about here, lift your front up to get over the front valance plastic, and pull it straight out. You might have to wiggle it a little bit out of your intake box. And what you're doing is working out this gasket here out of your intake box here. Now that that's out, we can set that aside. To remove your battery, we're going to start with the negative terminal. It's going to be a 10mm socket. Loosen that up. Pull that off and set it aside. Your positive terminal is going to be underneath this cover here. We're going to press back this tab and reveal our positive terminal. What we're going to disconnect is this one right here in front of our post. It's going to be a 10mm. Now this whole section, this whole plastic assembly is going to come up and off of that post. At this point you can close your lid, make it a little easier to work with, and set that whole assembly down into that void there. Now if your vehicle is like ours and it's still factory, you'll have a battery hold down that clamps on to the bottom lip of your battery. This one's going to be a 12mm socket. We'll take that out now. Here's our clamp. Set that aside for right now. Now your battery is free. At this point, we can lift it right up and out of the vehicle. Okay, now that you've got your battery out and your intake tube out, we have access to get to our hose clamp on our intake to our throttle body. It's going to be a 10mm socket. We'll loosen that up. Okay, we're going to do the same up top here. It's going to be another 10mm. While we're in this area, we see a hose here with a hose clamp on it with a pair of needle nose. We're just going to move that, grab that hose clamp. And move that out of the way. So we're actually going to remove this engine cover to make it a little bit easier to see. Just going to grab our engine cover in the front, lift straight up, and the back, straight up. And we can set this aside. This hose here is attached to our tube. We're going to remove this hose. So we have our hose clamp moved out of the way. I'm just going to take and spin that hose right off. We can set that hose out of the way. Now we can work this off a little bit easier. We can set that aside. Okay, so right here is our intake manifold runner control motor. What we're going to do to gain a little bit more access, you can see these hoses are pretty tight. Not going to give us enough room to back this out. We're going to take out this 8mm bolt here, holding these hoses in place. And if you follow this bottom hose over, there's going to be a 12mm bolt here that we're going to take out as well. That'll allow these lines to move, give us room to take this out. So starting with our 8mm, you can see that opened up a good amount of room here. We're just going to clear up a little bit more room with that 12 mil. And now you can see how much room we've gained to pull this motor itself out. So before we start on the motor, I'm going to take our electrical connection. We're going to remove that. Squeeze that down, pull that plug off, set that aside. And these bolts here are going to be 10 millimeter. We'll take those out now. There's going to be two up top, easy to get to. And if we pull this back, we have one more bolt right in the corner here. It's another 10 millimeter. So with our motor loose, we're still hung up on the actuator part, which is down here, that white piece. To get a little bit more room, we're going to disconnect this valve here. We are going to unplug this electrical connection. Just going to use a pick tool to pry up that locking tab, separate the plug. And then we're going to use a pair of needle nose pliers on this hose clamp here. Move that out of the way. And spin and remove that hose. Okay, now that's gained us a little bit more visibility in here. And this piece here is what we're going for. At this point, I'm going to recommend that you work with a magnet right next to where your tool is, so when that clip comes off, you don't lose it. Okay, so I have my magnet here. I'm actually going to do is touch it right to that metal piece. I'm going to use a pick tool, and we're going to pry off that metal clip. All right, and there's our metal clip. Now this actuator, with the hook tool, we can slide straight out. Now this fuel line could possibly give us a little trouble here, but let's see if we can work out around it. I'll pull the motor portion out. And this is what we were working for. Okay, so we're going to feed it back down almost as if we were going into position. We're going to stop about halfway. We're going to align this piece here. So there's a shaft that sticks out here that's going to go into the back of this piece. So we're going to align that. All right, then you just press it into place. And the little arm on top will go between two stops. So we're just going to use a pick tool just to make sure and see it rotate. Everything looks good, looks free. So from this point, What we want to do is lock it in place with this clip. So the large side is going to go towards the passenger compartment. The thin side is going to go towards the front of the vehicle. Okay. What we did here is clip on the front side here first, and then pushed onto the back side. Once you hear a clip or a click, we're just going to tug at this a little bit with our hook tool, make sure it's seated in place. Looks and feels pretty good, locked in. We can now move on to putting our motor in place. What we're going to do is pull these hoses away, put the motor portion back into the housing, and line up our bolt holes. With the bottom fingers here, push your motor over. You can actuate that motor to line up your bolt holes. What we'll do is we'll lock the top in place, just a couple of threads. And that should keep our bottom one somewhat in place. Looks pretty good. May have to just shift it over slightly. We're going to hold our motor in tight with our 10mm socket. We're going to tighten up our bolts. Okay, we're going to start by reattaching these hoses here, and then we'll put our bolt back in place to hold that. So first thing we're going to do is our electrical connection. We're just going to plug and push that together, plug that in. Our hose just going to be pushed onto that barb all the way. And a pair of needle nose to move our hose clamp back into position. And then we have a 12mm bolt holding this bracket to the block. We're just going to thread that in by hand to start. Make sure we're not cross-threading. All right. And then we have our 8mm bolt in front holding these hard lines in place. Looking around, making sure we have nothing left. We do have one more plug here on our motor. Go ahead and push and click that in. Now we can install our throttle body to our intake box tube. We're going to look for on the back side, on the box side, is this notch is going to match up to a notch in the back here. And the throttle body. Make sure your throttle body is clean where your tube's going to sit. Same thing back here. You want to make sure that flange is nice and clean. And we can start with our throttle body side. I'm going to lower the hose down to our throttle body and push that into place. And then rotate the tube backwards to meet the intake box. We can press the two together. Making sure our notch lines up. And then we have our hose It will slide back onto the tube. And we'll need to move our hose clamp back into position. Have a long pair of needle nose. And with our tube lined up and in place, we're going to double check on our throttle body side that everything lines up and we're fully seated. Everything looks good. With our 10 mil socket, we'll go ahead and tighten down our hose clamp on the bottom first. We'll just give that a wiggle, make sure it's snug. And then we'll do the same on the top. And now we can lower our engine cover back into place. We're going to line up the hole with our oil fill. And give it a few good taps each corner. It'll lift it up. Make sure you're in place. It doesn't want to come out. So now we can lower our battery into position. Before we do that, I just want to take note there is a lip here at the back that the lip at the bottom of your battery will sit into. That's going to lock in place the back of your battery. And you'll know you're as far back as you can go when you go to put this clamp on the front, and it goes into place right here. If it'll sit up on top and won't go all the way in, you know your battery has to go further back. In our case, we're good. We can thread our bolt in place. And again, with a 12 millimeter socket, we'll tighten that down. Now from here, we can connect our negative terminal. Just press this down onto the terminal and press it, seat it all the way down. And our 10 mil socket. Just tighten that down. Make sure it doesn't rotate or spin. Looks good. And now with our positive terminal, it's going to be a little bit more of a fight. Should be pretty easy. What we're going to do is take the entire plastic assembly here, just slide it up and over onto the post. And then we can open up our cap. We can push down, make sure that we are fully seated on that positive post. And then we can take our 10 millimeter socket and tighten this down. And again, we're not looking to over tighten, we're just looking to stop the rotation. And we're good. Once you're good, you can go ahead and close up that cap. Now we can install our intake into our intake box. We're going to press this gasket into place, into our intake box, and then rotate this downwards into place. So first thing, we're going to line it up and push it into the intake box. And now the front here should just drop down into place for your 3 clips. And these are just going to be push in place clips. Do 1, 2, and 3. And you're done.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.